Life sucked for pathetic Mahiru when his parents died in an accident. The poor boy soon became an orphan, and none of the relatives were willing to take him in because the cost of living is now outrageous anyway. Luckily, the brat's uncle decides to step in and do what the bunch of losers couldn't do, adopt his little nephew. Mahiru is now 15 years old, and he has grown into a shitty-ass loser who claims to love simple things. One day, he picks up a strange-looking cat on the street, and he decides to name the cat Kuro, oblivious that something sinister was waiting to happen. In school, the students are preparing for the school festival, and they suggest students pick up special roles. A student suggests that Mahiru be selected to provide costumes, but another complains that Mahiru is already doing too much. They are interrupted by Mahiru, who arrives with bowls of cookies for the students. The students storm him, and are all blown away by how delicious the cookies taste. Who knew an orphan could learn to cook that well? Shortly after, Mahiru announces yet again that he will be taking on the role of providing costumes for his classmates, along with the task of providing food. On their way home, Mahiru and his friends discuss how Mahiru has always taken up too many tasks in their class activities. He explains that he finds it troublesome when everyone stalls and avoids a task, and that he'd rather do it instead, since it's simpler that way. Ryusei thinks it's a silly mindset, since everyone ends up doing nothing, because he'll just get it done. The friends continue to talk and laugh until it's time for Sakuya to part ways. Sakuya warns them that there are rumors of vampires in certain areas, and they should be careful whenever they go shopping. The others think he has a screw loose, but he tells them about the strange murders in town and the unusual injuries inflicted on the victims. The friends mock Sakuya for believing in such rumors and scold him. Afterward, Mahiru leaves the others to get his laundry done. Mahiru is worried about Kuro when he arrives home. When he steps into his room, he realizes that the TV is on and wonders if he left it that way. However, Mahiru is frightened to see someone in his home. The figure is seated in front of the TV and eating. He turns around and finds Mahiru approaching, but ignores him. Mahiru becomes frightened and attacks the stranger with a broom. The attempt is meaningless as the figure easily evades and leaps over Mahiru. The figure still ignores Mahiru and turns away. The furious Mahiru prepares to attack a second time, but he falls and pulls the curtain, allowing beams of sunlight into the room. The figure changes immediately under the sunlight and becomes Kuro, the cat Mahiru picked up. Mahiru is shocked, and the Kuro reverts into a human when the curtains are shut once more. He asks what Kuri is, and he learns that Kiri is a vampire. Mahiru panics and struggles to throw Kuro out of his room, but Kuro pleads that he doesn't want to be thrown into the sun. Mahiru recalls Sakuya's warnings and becomes frightened, but Kuro assures him that he has no intention of drinking the blood of a pathetic, ugly loser like Mahiru. He tells Mahiru that he will leave once it's dark, and he warns Mahiru not to say his name while he is in his human form. Mahiru claims he doesn't know what the stranger's name is, claiming he only called him Kuro because he thought he was a cat. Suddenly, a bright ring of light appears around Kuro's neck and Mahiru's arm. When this happens, Mahiru demands to know what he meant, and he continues to bug the lazy Kuro. After a while, Kuro decides to explain what happened. He explains that he is a special type of vampire that forms a contract with a master. They can only take blood from their master, and they have to obey their master's commands. Kuro tells Mahiru that what happened was the initial but temporary stage of the contract, and if he doesn't drink Mahiru's blood in the next 24 hours, then the contract would be automatically annulled. Mahiru becomes relieved, and he throws Kuro outside his home. However, he soon learns that until the contract is cancelled, they can only be a certain distance away from each other, and the two losers are stuck together for the next 24 hours. Stuck together, the two losers could barely get along. Kuro asks after Mahiru's parents since he hasn't seen them, and he learns that they are gone. Kuro wonders if that's why he was kind enough to pick him up from the streets, although Mahiru had only made things complicated for both of them. Mahiru recalls he needs to meet his friends, but Kuro reminds him they can't stay far away from one another. However, Mahiru grabs Kuro and heads out to meet his friends regardless. As soon as Mahiru leaves the room, he hears a sound that startles him, but he thinks it's his imagination and leaves. Mahiru tries to convince his friends that his new cat is a vampire, but they don't believe him. Mahiru is sure Sakuya would have believed him, and he attempts to turn Kuro into his human form. Unfortunately, the sly cat doesn't respond to any of Mahiru's antics. In a split second, Mahiru sees a strange shadow in the mirror as a street performer appears beside them. The jester causes a ruckus and pulls swords out of his cap to amuse the students. Mahiru is confused by what happened, but he becomes wary of the jester. Everyone else is fascinated except Ryusei, and he prepares to leave with Mahiru and their friend. The jester stops Ryusei and mockingly asks the audience why he stopped Ryusei. The jester suddenly bites into Ryusei's neck, causing blood to spill everywhere. Everyone panics and begins to run as the jester laughs and jumps around. Everyone else escapes the streets to observe from a distance while Ryusei's friends stay with him in terror. The jester reveals that he is a vampire and informs Mahiru that he knows about Kuro. Mahiru asks if he is friends with Kuro, but the jester responds that he detests Kuro and will kill Mahiru if he protects the cat. Suddenly, Kuro appears and attacks the jester. Mahiru is surprised and questions Kuro, but Kuro simply ignores him and asks them to escape, dragging Mahiru along. Mahiru stops and insists that they return to fight the jester, but Kuro refuses, as he has no intention of fighting another vampire. Mahiru resolves to save his friends by himself and charges back towards the street. The jester approaches Ryusei to attack him once more, but Mahiru appears and tries to restrain the jester alone. He has made up his mind to stop the jester even if it costs him his life, and he asks his friends to escape. The jester becomes furious and prepares to strike Mahiru, but Kuro appears and saves Mahiru with his own body. Kuro complains that he is weak because he hasn't taken blood for a century and asks Mahiru to escape with his friends while he can. Mahiru responds by forcing his wrists into Kuro's mouth, causing Kuro to take his blood and form an actual contract. Kuro admits that Mahiru is now his Eve, and he is a servant. Kuro's expression changes drastically as huge dark claws appear on his hands. He charges at the jester and slices him in one swift motion. Kuro prepares to finish him off, but Mahiru holds him back and forcefully stops him. The jester transforms into a doll and informs Mahiru that he isn't dead. When questioned, he reveals that he attacked Mahiru and Kuro because he was sent by his own master, Tsubaki. Kuro insists that he has no idea who Tsubaki is before the lazy cat lays down in exhaustion. Mahiru wonders who Tsubaki is and how scary Kuro was when he fought the jester. Mahiru also collapsed due to exhaustion. Meanwhile, a figure watches the entire event unfold from a distance and gives an eerie laugh once it's all over. The next day, Mahiru awakes in his room. He picks up Kuro and wonders if everything that happened was a dream. But once the cat speaks, he is certain everything that happened the previous day was all real, and that his life is messed up. Mahiru arrives at school and asks after Ryusei from Sakuya. Ryusei appears just in time along with Koyuki. Mahiru is relieved to see Ryusei, and he asks if Ryusei is fine. However, he soon discovers that Ryusei and Koyuki do not know what happened the previous day. They mock him when he talks about the vampire jester and insist that Ryusei's injuries were from an accident. Mahiru could only wonder who had access to Men in Black tech to wipe his friend's memories. Mahiru wonders how the others could have different memories from him. He is disturbed by the annoying Kuro, who complains about staying in Mahiru's bag. When Mahiru opens the bag, he finds the doll jester. The jester protests that he needs blood and wants to return to Tsubaki, but Mahiru ignores him. While they walk in the street, Mahiru tries to learn what Kuro knows about other vampires and possibly Tsubaki. Suddenly, it begins to rain, and they appear inside a blood-red dome. They are approached by some loser looking like a third-rate Shinigami from the Soul Society. He asks Mahiru to tell him about his recent experience, and the talkative jester doll responds from inside the bag. Mahiru becomes scared and Kuro tries to avoid the confrontation. They're shocked when they notice the eccentric figure already has Mahiru's bag in his hands, and he takes out the jester doll. The jester doll refers to the figure as Tsubaki. When Mahiru learns the name, he quickly becomes frightened. Tsubaki appears around him before he can respond, and this low-budget Aizen mocks Mahiru. Tsubaki throws Kuro to the ground, and the latter turns into his human form. Tsubaki refers to Kuro as his older brother, but Kuro claims he has no idea who the mad stranger is. Tsubaki decides to list out the 7 Servamp siblings. The oldest is Kuro, referred to as the sleepy ash of sloth. The next is pride, then envy, wrath, greed, gluttony, and lust. While these 7 are referred to as the true Servamp siblings, Tsubaki reveals that he is the final Servamp, melancholy. Mahiru is shocked by how many siblings Kuro has, and the dumb loser wonders if they are all cats. However, he learns that Kuro is the only cat, and Tsubaki transforms into a fox. He fights around with Kuro for a split second before reverting to his human form. Mahiru asks Tsubaki what he hopes to gain by killing people, and we soon learn that this psycho has no real motives except his hatred for humanity. He becomes even more furious when Mahiru claims that humans are innocent because he believes no one is innocent, especially his siblings who are trying to erase his existence at all costs. He pulls a sword from his kimono and asks Kuro to summon the rest of their siblings so he can destroy them together. He attacks Kuro, but Kuro blocks the first slash. Mahiru offers blood, but Kuro refuses as he is too freaking lazy and doesn't want to fight. Tsubaki continues his barrage of assault and knocks Kuro down. Mahiru attempts to run towards Kuro to help him, but Tsubaki only kicks Kuro further away. Tsubaki grabs Mahiru and informs him that he wants a war because wars are entertaining. Tsubaki rants about how no one understands or knows him anyway, and his desires are something they can't understand. Somehow, Mahiru finds the feeling familiar, and he recalls how he felt after he lost his parents. He remained in a state of of denial and constantly avoided his friends until his uncle helped him. We suddenly have some quality therapy session when our boy begins to talk to this serial-killing psycho about why he feels the way he does. Tsubaki is stunned by Mahiru's audacity and laughs. He insists that the best way to deal with his feelings is an all-out war where everyone would inadvertently die. Mahiru vows to stop Tsubaki. He threatens that he will simply form a contract with Tsubaki and force him to do his bidding as a Servamp. Tsubaki laughs and prepares to strike Mahiru as Kuro jumps in to save Mahiru. Suddenly, the two disappear without a trace, leaving Tsubaki and his doll in their strange dome of blood. The jester doll asks Tsubaki to chase down Mahiru and Kuro, but Tsubaki refuses and leaves. The dome disappears in an instant and they appear on the street again. Meanwhile, Kuro and Mahiru appear in an alley. Mahiru wonders how they escaped Tsubaki, and Kuro explains that another Servamp saved them. The two are startled by two little girls who ask them to come, and before they can refuse, another guy appears on a chair and insists that they come along with him. Inside the stranger's vehicle, he introduces himself as Misono, the Eve of the Servamp, all of the love of lust. Mahiru is delighted to find another Luke himself, and he wonders if Tsubaki also has an Eve. They arrive at Misono's mansion, and Misono pulls his chair out of nowhere to take a seat as soon as he steps out of the vehicle. Mahiru scolds him for being lazy, but he learns that Misono has a weak body and needs constant rest. A butterfly appears, and Misono calls it Lily. The butterfly transforms into the Servamp of lust. Misono scolds Lily for attempting to strip, and they invite the others into the mansion. Inside the mansion, Mahiru learns that Lily is responsible for making his friends forget what happened when they were attacked by the vampire jester. Mahiru is delighted to meet an experienced Eve and his Servamp, and he hopes to learn a lot from them. However, things take a drastic turn when they step into a hall. The doors are shut, and Misono sits on his chair again. He calls Lily to take from his blood, and a scythe appears in Lily's hands. Misono complains that Mahiru was useless against Tsubaki and has zero experience in his use of a Servamp. He insists that Mahiru should become his slave and listen to his commands. Lily swings his scythe, and they barely dodge in time. He asks them to become Misono's slaves, but Mahiru refuses. He escapes out of the room with Kuro and runs out of the mansion. He wonders what manner of psycho they are. Unfortunately, the route doesn't lead away from the manor, but to a garden instead. Mahiru turns around and finds so many little children staring at them through the windows. The daft Mahiru thinks they are all Lily's kids, but Lily appears and responds that they are merely his subclass. Lower vampires made by Servamps and loyal to the vampires that made them. They explain that little kids and other subclasses are being targeted by Tsubaki, and this is why they need Mahiru's help. Mahiru understands that Misono wants to help everyone, and he agrees to help as a friend, but not as a slave. Misono accepts the proposal, and he vouches to teach Mahiru to become a better Eve and find a weapon of his own. Later on, Mahiru and Sakuya go shopping. Sakuya asks why Mahiru is always keeping the cat, and Mahiru responds that it's an ordinary pet. Sakuya gives Mahiru a wristband he purchased for him. When the two leave the store, Mahiru senses a sinister figure trailing them but thinks it's all his imagination. Before the two depart, Sakuya asks if Mahiru is hiding anything from him, but Mahiru assures him he isn't. They bid each other farewell. However, Sakuya is suddenly attacked on his way home. Mahiru is in Misono's mansion with Kuro, and Misono scolds Kuro for being too lazy to even teach his Eve to get a weapon. Mahiru expresses his desire to have a weapon because he wants to be better equipped to protect his friends. Kuro asks Mahiru to close his eyes, and he suddenly appears in a different plane. A sinister shadow appears before him with a confetti and wishes him a happy birthday. The creature tells Mahiru that he is within Kuro and leads him to where he will get a weapon. The creature explains that it is a part of Kuro and is in charge of power. They arrive at a heap of boxes, and it asks Mahiru to choose one. Mahiru picks up a box and a black broom appears. The biggest build-up so far, and bro's luck is garbage. Man really fumbled and picked a broom. The broom turns into a tattoo around his wrist, and he covers it with Sakuya's gift. We see Tsubaki and the jester taking a meal at a restaurant. They seem to be waiting for someone, and a figure soon arrives. It drags a body into the restaurant, and everyone in the restaurant flees. We discover that this figure is Sakuya, and he is also a vampire. The body with him is a subclass that was probably spying on him. Tsubaki asks if Sakuya isn't worried that the other students will know he is a vampire, but Sakuya doesn't care. He is only brimming with hatred for liars. Meanwhile, Mahiru struggles with summoning his broom. He asks for pointers from Misono and Lily. They explain that he has to form a stronger resolve and willpower to be able to summon the weapon. Lily advises that he thinks about the things he wants to protect and to use that as a propeller to summon the weapon. Mahiru thinks and determines that his only desire is to protect his friends and everyone dear to him. He even suggests that he introduces them to Misono and Lily. Misono asks him not to because they would only get involved in everything and be in danger. However, Mahiru believes there's no harm in introducing them to Misono since they're now friends. Mahiru vows to protect his friends with all he has, and that Kuro would help him. The apathetic Kuro simply agrees to do whatever Mahiru asks him to. The mark glows, but Misono falls asleep before he can explain what it means. Bro thinks he is Sleeping Beauty. Lily explains that Misono has a condition that causes him to fall asleep at a particular time, and suggests that they continue their training the next day. The next day, Mahiru searches for Sakuya in school, and he learns that Sakuya has been absent for a few days. Mahiru is worried because he has called Sakuya several times but hasn't been able to get through to him. He promises the others that he will visit Sakuya's home after class. He unveils some of the costumes he already prepared, and everyone loves them. After class, Mahiru purchases a meal with the hopes of heading to Sakuya's house. However, things begin to get strange when Kuro asks him who Sakuya is. Mahiru casually tries to provide an answer, but he soon realizes that he barely recalls anything about his childhood friend. He has no idea who Sakuya's parents are, or how they died. He can't recall how they met or where Sakuya lives, despite having a vague recollection that he had been to Sakuya's home many times. While he struggles to remember, Sakuya appears behind him and calls him. Mahiru was startled, but he scolded Sakuya for disappearing from school. Sakuya explains that he got involved in an accident and had to stay home for a while. Mahiru offers him the food he bought, but they suddenly hear a scream. Sakuya asks Mahiru to trust him and leads him away to a deserted place. The brain-dead Mahiru trusts Sakuya because he has 1.5 brain cells. He turns around and asks Mahiru if he has been telling lies. Mahiru wonders what is wrong and asks Sakuya to stop acting strange. Suddenly, Mahiru and Kuro are tied up with a series of strings, and Kuro is trapped with swords. The vampire jester descends from the top of a building and stands with Sakuya. Kuro eventually announces that Sakuya is one of Tsubaki's subclasses. Sakuya asks Mahiru to begin to recall all their memories together, and Mahiru realizes that he has no childhood memories with Sakuya. Sakuya attacks Mahiru with daggers, but Kuro protects him with his body, taking the injuries from Sakuya and the jester. Sakuya explains that they can find weaknesses in humans through emotions and hypnotize them, and that it was really easy to hypnotize Mahiru and plant all the memories in his head. Sakuya is furious that Mahiru lied to him about Kuro when he asked, and refuses Mahiru's excuse of wanting to protect his friends. Sakuya continues to have a breakdown, and Mahiru asks Kuro to help. However, Kuro refuses because Mahiru doesn't have a resolve. He doesn't know if Mahiru wants Sakuya dead or wants to protect him, and the power he can draw from Mahiru's blood is only dependent on Mahiru's resolve. While Mahiru struggles with the dilemma, Misono and Lily appear. They free Kuro and Mahiru from the strings, and Lily attacks the vampire jester with his scythe. Meanwhile, Misono faces Sakuya alone, and Mahiru explains that Sakuya is one of his friends. Misono expresses his disgust and tells Sakuya that he will protect Misono from him. While Lily fights with the jester, Misono suddenly summons his chair and uses it to trap the jester. The jester struggles but can't break free until Lily catches up and strikes him with his scythe. The jester falls to the ground, completely immobilized. They turn to Sakuya, and Misono expresses his disappointment that he would betray Mahiru. Sakuya's expression suddenly took a different turn, and he began to regret his actions towards Mahiru. Lily warns that it's a trap, but Misono is already hypnotized and he releases his hold of Lily. The paralyzed jester suddenly moved like a puppet and cut Lily's leg while Sakuya slashed at Misono with his daggers. They realize that there is a third subclass using strings. Mahiru is furious and he watches Misono fall. Sakuya catches Mahiru before he can move and holds a dagger to his throat. He tells Mahiru that he had never enjoyed any of their time spent together, and that there is nothing he feels towards them but an overwhelming urge to destroy them. He continued to step down on Mahiru, but while he spoke, a lady appeared in his mind and called him out for telling Mahiru lies to get Mahiru riled up. Sakuya stops and turns around to find the figure. Kuro asks Mahiru to escape with him while they still have the chance, but Mahiru refuses and insists he must avenge Misono. Tsubaki appears beside Otogiri, the puppeteer, and he watches Mahiru with anticipation. The broom appears, and Mahiru begins to hit Sakuya. It inflicts terrible wounds on Sakuya, but the furious Mahiru continues to attack him. We learn that it was all a part of Sakuya's plan so that he could die at the hands of Mahiru. Inside Kuro's mind, there is turmoil. The creature in his mind informs him that their minds are overflowing with each other, and Mahiru's rage is being amplified. Kuro snaps back to reality and bites Mahiru's neck. Immediately, Kuro is engulfed with a strange energy, and the turmoil within him begins to flow out. A dark creature appears from Kuro's back, and the energy begins to engulf everyone. This low-budget Jinchuriki scares Otogiri, and he turns to Tsubaki for help. Otogiri realizes that Tsubaki is gone, and she begins to pull the other subclass away from Kuro. However, Sakuya struggles to rescue Mahiru. He confesses that he said everything he said to infuriate Mahiru so that Kuro would kill him. Talk about crazy redemption plots. Suddenly, Kuro is shot from behind and he falls to the ground. We see another Servamp and it's Eve. He orders the Servamp to stop Kuro, and it appears above Kuro with guns, shooting until Kuro turns back into a cat. Otogiri instantly escapes with Sakuya and the worthless jester. A car appears afterwards and Lily helps Misono into the vehicle. Mahiru assures Lily he will be fine and asks him to take care of the injured Misono. When the vehicle leaves, Mahiru blames himself for Misono's injuries, but the strange Eve assures him that Misono knew quite well what he was getting into. The Eve introduces his Servamp as Envy, but he calls him JJ. Mahiru learns that the Eve is an antique dealer who is also very eccentric with a few loose screws. He apologizes that he was too forceful while trying to stop Kuro, and recognizes Mahiru's lack of resolve to kill Sakuya. He informs Mahiru that he would be glad to teach him how to dissolve his contract with Kuro if he thinks the life of an Eve isn't appropriate for him. The Eve explains that the instant you lose control of yourself, the power of the Servamp will engulf you, and warns Mahiru to be careful. When they arrive home, Kuro wonders if Mahiru will go to school. Mahiru learns that Kuro's injuries have been healed, and he is relieved. Kuro asks if Mahiru regrets taking him in, but Mahiru doesn't give a response. He doesn't regret taking Kuro, he is just unsure of what he should do with his newfound powers. While walking through the streets, Mahiru finds Tsubaki in a restaurant and branches. He is shocked to see the devil eating casually in the restaurant without care. He asks Tsubaki why he made Sakuya his subclass. Tsubaki narrates Sakuya's past to Mahiru. Sakuya had abusive parents who did all they could to make money. One night, they forced his sister to commit suicide so that they could make money off her life insurance. They forced him to provide a false statement to the police, making him an accomplice in the fraud. A few years later, they forced Sakuya to do the same. However, Tsubaki saved him, just as he was dying. Mahiru learns that a subclass is formed when a dying human drinks the blood of a Servamp. The subclass also has no choice but to obey every order given by the Servamp. Tsubaki mocks Mahiru when he notices his shock. Mahiru is so furious that he begins to tremble. Tsubaki decides to leave after so much murderous intent begins to see out of the bag from Kuro. Tsubaki reveals that he has no intention to fight and he leaves the frozen Mahiru in the restaurant. Mahiru tried as much as he could to move, but he remained frozen. He begins to think about the trauma Sakuya must have sustained growing up, and blames himself for not trying harder to understand Sakuya's pain. Recalling the iconic words of his Uncle Ben, our boy knows that, with great power comes great responsibility. He might never become Hokage, but at least he should try hard to save his Sasuke. Mahiru hurries and heads back to his school, running as fast as he can. He bumps into a nerdy Four Eyes, but Four Eyes has so much aura that he has a pillow prepared to cushion his fall. He assures Mahiru that nothing surprises a player such as himself who is always ready. Mahiru ignores Four Eyes and continues to his class. The others are delighted to see him, but they have all forgotten who Sakuya is. They were informed that Sakuya had transferred to another school. Ryusei complains that while he recalls Sakuya's personality, no one can remember what Sakuya looks like. Mahiru assures them that he will find Sakuya if he attends the school festival. Meanwhile, Mahiru continues to send texts to Misono, who refuses to respond. Lily responds to the messages instead and impersonates Misono. Misono isn't furious. He is only sad he couldn't protect Mahiru despite making such a grand entrance. He complains that he wants to become even stronger to protect others around him. The next day, the school festival begins. Ryusei and Koyuki parade the hallways and walk past Sakuya, but they can't recognize him. Sakuya is surprised to see them with a sign stating that they are waiting for him to return. While Sakuya is distracted, Kuro suddenly leaps on his face, stunning him for a while. Mahiru appears instantly and calls out to Sakuya, asking him to talk. However, Sakuya begins to run and asks Mahiru to stay away. He says a bunch of hurtful stuff, but Mahiru assures him that he knows everything and that the trick wouldn't work a second time. They arrive at the roof of the school, and Sakuya stands at the edge. He reminds Mahiru that most of their memories together are fake, and that they've only known each other for a year. Mahiru still insists that Sakuya returns, but Sakuya jumps. Surprisingly, Mahiru jumps after Sakuya and grabs him. He summons his broom immediately and rides it off into a tree. Sakuya is surprised and asks if he knew the broom could fly, but Mahiru reveals that he didn't know he was Harry Potter until he made the jump. He only tries it because a black cat with a broom screams witch. Sakuya finds this hilarious, and they both begin to laugh. Sakuya explains that Tsubaki has been the only help and support he has had through all his dark times. Mahiru understands this since he feels the same way about his uncle. Mahiru promises Sakuya that he will fight and defeat Tsubaki to free Sakuya. Sakuya is delighted but leaves suddenly. Mahiru turns to Kuro and asks for help, promising to get strong enough to fight and defeat Tsubaki until his friend is free. Meanwhile, Sakuya recalls the first time he met with Mahiru, and he is moved to tears by how dear Mahiru had been. We see Kuro playing a video game while Mahiru struggles to get a letter opened. He approaches Kuro with the letter for help, but Kuro claims it's a stupid prank and seizes it. Meanwhile, A mysterious figure seems to be spying on Kuro and Mahiru in a hidden facility. Tsubaki and his subclasses are seated together and playing games. He is sitting together with Shamrock, who is a subclass with an eye patch. Otogiri and the vampire jester are also sitting at the table while Sakuya remains at the window. When Tsubaki requests a report, Shamrock assures him that everything is going according to plan. He expresses his concern about Sakuya, who he thinks would betray them sooner or later. Tsubaki ignores Sakuya and is engrossed with their evil plans instead, obsessed with all the destruction they are about to inflict. Kuro continues to become more popular among the students because of his reputation as a cat with human-level intelligence. They gather to applaud and give him gifts. It was the last day of the semester, and the students left school for the summer break. On his way home, Mahiru scolds Kuro for not being careful enough around people and warns that his disguise might be uncovered. Kuro assures Mahiru that there is nothing to worry about. They arrive at the summer festival, and Mahiru is shocked by how quickly got so many gifts from everyone else. While they await the fireworks to start, Shamrock appears and hands Mahiru a case. They've never met Shamrock, so they have no idea who he is. He tells Mahiru the briefcase must belong to someone in the festival, and asks Mahiru to find the owner before the fireworks begin, because he is about to leave. Shamrock leaves before Mahiru can process what happened, but he heads for the park to find the owner anyway. While Mahiru was searching through the crowd, he bumped into a figure carrying a box. He apologizes and learns that this figure is searching for someone else. Mahiru advises that he announces on the speakers, and suggests they go together since he also intended to announce the missing briefcase. While they walk, Mahiru is curious about the box and inquires what it is. He learns that it's an actual coffin, and it is supposed to be for a vampire to sleep. Mahiru was startled and frozen in place, but the entire park was suddenly rocked by an explosion. Mahiru is shocked, and someone yells that the source is a silver briefcase from a stranger with an eye patch. Mahiru instantly realized that the box with him also contained a bomb. He wonders what the next course of action can be, because he is certain the bomb will explode before the fireworks begin. He tells the stranger that he has no choice but to trust him, so he summons Kuro. Kuro takes blood from Mahiru, and the two leap into the air. The stranger recognizes Kuro as a Servamp. Kuro and Mahiru leap into the sky and throw the briefcase. Unfortunately, the explosion doesn't happen. Shamrock observes from a distance and is delighted by the havoc he is causing. The stranger catches the case and places it in his coffin. The box explodes inside the coffin, but it isn't affected. Smoke seeps out of the coffin, and Mahiru is awestruck by the feat. He asks to know who the stranger is, and he introduces himself as Tetsu. The coffin opens, and a scorched bat escapes from within the coffin. Tetsu refers to the bat as Hugh, and claims he has been searching for him. Kuro recognizes the bat as the Servamp of Pride. Meanwhile, Misono receives a call from his father about his health while in the hospital. He assures his father that he will be fine and stay out of trouble. Once the call ends, Lily assures him that he will still be able to help Mahiru once he recovers. Tetsu offered Hugh some of his blood, and this helped Hugh to heal so much faster. He eventually makes his grand entrance and introduces himself with all his pride. Hugh even takes time to narrate how he met Tetsu, who went to extreme lengths to ensure that anyone, including Hugh, could stay at their resort. Hugh gets serious and explains that the explosions were all orchestrated by Tsubaki, and he knows this because he has a wide network of subclasses who informed him beforehand. Hugh reminds Kuro to be alert, as Tsubaki isn't their only enemy currently on the move. Mahiru returns home, and he wonders if the rest of the Servamps would be willing to join them against Tsubaki. Immediately, the doctor opens, and someone pulls Mahiru in and shuts the elevator, while Kuro falls back outside. The instant the elevator opens, there are vampire hunters in the elevator, and another lands from the ceiling on Kuro's shoulder. Mahiru finds himself in a facility, and he meets the Four Eyes nerd from school. The nerd introduces himself as Tsuyuki, a member of the C3. The C3 is a neutral party between humans and vampires. Tsuyuki asks Mahiru if he would be willing to work with them to stop Tsubaki. Mahiru is shocked and wonders how Tsuyuki knows so much despite being a student, but he learns that Tsuyuki only impersonated a student to spy on him. Tsuyuki drops the shocking news that Tsubaki used to be a weapon of the C3 long ago, but he got away and has since turned wild. He informs Mahiru that the C3 intends to kill all of Tsubaki's subclass before defeating him. Mahiru refuses because Sakuya is one of Tsubaki's subclasses, and he wants Sakuya to live. Tsuyuki reminds Mahiru that saving the world is greater than any of their individual feelings, and that Mahiru should let go of Sakuya. Mahiru refuses and decides to leave the facility. Tsuyuki tells him that there are 52 doors, and only a single door leads out of the facility. He either agrees to the offer and is led out of the facility, or he can choose to find the exit by himself. However, if he takes too long, he will never see Kuro again. Meanwhile, Kuro is having a hard time facing off the hunters by himself. He is overwhelmed and can't fight back, trying desperately to escape. They display overwhelming prowess and coordination, even though they are a bit rusty. Tsurugi, one of the hunters, tells Kuro he wouldn't be in so much trouble if he had simply told Mahiru what was in the letter. Tsuyuki tells Mahiru that the current team of hunters chasing down Kuro is their fiercest unit, often referred to as the Mad Dogs of C3. Mahiru attempts one of the doors, running as hard as he can, and it leads to a maze. He chooses a path and continues running until he arrives back in the room. Tsuyuki increases the stakes when he tells Mahiru that there is a maximum distance permitted between an Eve and its Servamp. If the distance exceeds this, Mahiru will begin to feel sick until he dies, while Kuro will get weaker. The hunters inform Kuro that they have Mahiru and freezes in his steps. He is immediately enclosed by one of the hunters. Mahiru becomes furious and summons his broom. He spins around with the broom and creates a tornado that breaks the ceiling of the facility, opening a path to escape. Tsuyuki admits that he is lost and that is the only way that leads outside the facility, but asks Mahiru not to trust vampires because they are dangerous. Mahiru retorts that he trusts the vampires because they are his friends and is willing to keep them safe. Tsuyuki reveals that he lost a loved one to a vampire many years ago and collapses in sorrow. Our low-budget Harry Potter ignores him and simply leaves the facility. The hunters are closing on Kuro, but Mahiru appears on the broom and escapes with Kuro. The hunters receive a call and they're instructed not to chase after the vampire. While they escape, Mahiru wonders why people hate and kill for no reason, but refuse to help if there isn't a reason. He loses control of the broom and they almost crash. We see the Servamps and their Eves meeting at a resort. Mahiru complains that they are not taking it seriously and scolds everyone. He insists that they aren't there to just mess around, but to discuss Tsubaki. Mahiru thinks everyone is too relaxed and wonders what Tsubaki will do next before helping the brain-dead Misono use a vending machine. Misono suggests that they round up Tsubaki's subclasses so they can have information about him. Mahiru suggests that they reach out to Envy's Eve, but Misono insists that he is dangerous. While they discuss, Hugh arrives and informs them that one of his subclasses has a piece of information. Mahiru pursues the lead, and the subclass describes a person who assaulted another subclass. Luckily, Mahiru and Kuro find him quickly, but they are too scared to attack him. They begin to trail him, and they notice a hedgehog within his cage. Mahiru wonders why Kuro doesn't have any subclass of his own, and Kuro explains that he thinks making one is too troublesome. Mahiru realizes that there is so much he doesn't know about Kuro yet. When their target branches off the street, Kuro warns Mahiru against chasing after him, but Mahiru insists that it needs to be done. However, when he branches down off the road, he finds their mark waiting for him. Mahiru is startled that they were discovered so easily by the strange boy. The boy steps back and suddenly summons a piano. He strikes a few notes and Kuro feels his body become heavy. The figure notices that Kuro is affected and attacks him, kicking him up a building like a ball. Mahiru immediately summons his broom to rescue Kuro, who is defenseless against the barrage of attacks. Once Mahiru interferes, Kuro turns into a cat and takes blood from Mahiru. Kuro immediately heals all of his injuries and prepares to attack again, asking the figure to release the Servamp. The figure doesn't hesitate and lets the hedgehog out of the cage, telling Kuro they can have him. However, the hedgehog transforms into a human and presents himself as Lawless, the Servamp of greed. He also introduces the figure kicking Kuro around as Angel, his Eve. Mahiru and Kuro realize that the Eve and Servamp are an eccentric pair, and getting to work with them would be hard. Mahiru tries to convince Angel to join them, because Tsubaki could isolate and attack Lawless. However, Angel refuses and insists that he works alone. Lawless and Kuro almost get in a fight, when Lawless accuses Kuro of being responsible for letting Tsubaki escape. When Lawless prepares to leave, Mahiru asks him to help them instead, but Lawless only comments about how normal Mahiru is to be Kuro's Eve and leaves. When they return home, Mahiru is surprised to find Angel on TV, and he learns that Angel is a popular artist known as Licht. Hugh tells Mahiru that Licht is in trouble because Lawless is the only Servamp who kills his own Eve once he is bored of them. Meanwhile, Tsubaki appears as an investor and buys all the tickets to Licht's next show. Once the deal is sealed, he returns to his subclasses and asks them to get ready to continue with their plan. On the day of the show, Mahiru tries to sneak into the hall, but can't. He meets an attendant who informs him that all the tickets have been reserved. The attendant decides to sneak Mahiru into the concert hall. However, on their way to the hall, Mahiru sees one of Tsubaki's subclass and becomes wary. While the concert is on and Angel is playing, the entire audience suddenly rises with weapons. Lawless realizes that they are all vampires sent to kill Licht, but Lawless promises to defend him. Mahiru runs as fast as he can, hoping to make it to the concert hall in time. They are awestruck to find that Lawless has killed all the vampires present by himself. Mahiru is in disbelief that Lawless alone is strong enough to stop all the vampires, Licht doesn't appreciate Lawless and scolds him instead. Lawless calls him out for being nothing but an ungrateful snub, and Licht attacks in fury. Lawless evades and slams Licht into the wall. Mahiru becomes furious and challenges Lawless. He admits that Lawless is strong, but he doesn't believe Lawless is powerful enough to face Tsubaki. Lawless responds by attacking Mahiru, but Kuro saves him. Lawless decides to tell Mahiru about their history. When the 7 siblings were together, they received a letter from C3, imploring them to kill someone. The vampire siblings argued about the request, and they decided to have a vote to decide. 3 of the siblings voted against the cause, while another 3 voted for it. While Lawless narrated the story, Kuro became so furious that the energy exuding from him was starting to cover up the concert hall. Mahiru is too frightened to turn. Lawless realizes that Kuro is furious, and he further mocks him. Meanwhile, the subclasses report their terrible loss to Tsubaki. Tsubaki is so heartbroken that he recalls a memory and cries. Kuro and Lawless are already caught in a lock. Mahiru is confused about how to stop the Servamps who are fighting on stage. Luckily, Licht returns and stops them, binding Kuro to the wall with Mahiru's broom. He also stomps down on Lawless before summoning his keyboard once more. He begins to play a note that instantly begins to incite memories in the others. Mahiru has memories of his mother and begins to weep. Kuro's expression is frozen, and Lawless dashes towards Licht to stop him. Suddenly, 2 of Lawless's subclasses appear and stop Licht and Lawless. Mahiru turns to Kuro, but Kuro is unresponsive. Lawless realizes that one of Tsubaki's subclasses is still awake and approaches him to kill him. However, Mahiru stops Lawless and saves the subclass. Lawless drops his sword and leaves in anger, leaving Licht and the rest of the subclasses. One of them introduces himself as Licht's manager and gives Mahiru his card, asking him to call whenever he needs help. When Licht is about to leave, Mahiru asks him to teach him how to use his weapon more effectively, but Licht only insults him and leaves. Licht's manager also leaves with the subclass, Mahiru, and the eerie silent Kuro. Meanwhile, while Lawless is leaving the concert venue, he is suddenly ambushed by Tsubaki, who appears behind him. Lawless remains crippled in fear as Tsubaki unsheathes his sword. We see Misono and Lily inside the hot spring, and Lily informs Misono that Mahiru has left the resort by himself. Misono becomes furious that Mahiru could be in danger and leaves to retrieve him, but he slips and falls. When Mahiru returns, Misono scolds him for going off by himself. Everyone knows that the low-budget Harry Potter would be dead if Lawless wasn't OP. However, they are glad that Mahiru was able to capture one of Tsubaki's subclasses. Misono suggests that they restrain the subclass, Leela, but Mahiru protects him because Leela is gentle. Yu approaches him intending to interrogate him and find out information about Tsubaki. Mahiru asks them to be prepared because Tsubaki could come to free Leela. The others think Tsubaki wouldn't move for a single subclass, but Mahiru knows that Tsubaki values all of his subjects and has demonstrated it again and again. When the others don't believe his story, Mahiru attempts to ask Mahiru to testify, but Kuro is already leaving the room. Mahiru follows him to try to talk to him, but Kuro's expression remains hostile. Mahiru wonders why Kuro has remained the same way since his fight with Lawless. Mahiru knows that the grudge will prevent all the Servamps from working together, and he attempts to ask Kuro what is wrong. Unfortunately, Kuro's countenance merely worsens, and Mahiru becomes too frightened to ask any further. He simply asks that Kuro return with him to the resort, and Kuro reverts to his cat form. The two walk back to the resort with Mahiru frightened by Kuro's actions. Later that night, Mahiru speaks to Leela and gives him something to eat. Leela wonders why Mahiru continues to care for him, and Mahiru explains that he has no reason to hate Leela or continue to fight with him. Leela reveals that he feels the same, but he warns Mahiru to be wary of Higan, Tsubaki's second in command. The next day, Mahiru thinks about Lila's warning. He notices that Kuro isn't in the room and probably sleeps outside all day. He received a call from Krantz, who is Licht's manager. He informs Mahiru that Lawless has been missing since his fight in the concert hall. We see Licht struggling to move, and he recalls Lawless's warning that they shouldn't be too far apart for more than 24 hours. While he rests, a figure suddenly appears behind him and informs him that the person he seeks is far away. Licht has a bad premonition and draws away from the figure. He recalls how he has always valued creativity and wanted to make music. He found Lawless as a hedgehog on the road, and they've been together ever since. Licht continues to resist capture from the figure, and he begins to sustain multiple injuries. He lands a kick, but his attacks do not affect this strange enemy. The figure snaps his fingers, and Licht's injuries are suddenly ignited. The man warns that Tsubaki has already defeated Lawless and asks Licht to surrender. Licht refuses and the man becomes serious, creating a massive pillar of fire. Mahiru sees the pillar of fire and asks Kuro to accompany him to help Licht. Kuro hesitates and suggests they call Lily and Misono. Mahiru calls him out for being lazy, and Kuro has no choice but to follow him. They find Licht in the hands of the man. He introduces himself as Higan, one of Tsubaki's main subclasses. Mahiru recalls Lila's warning and immediately summons Kuro to fight. However, something bizarre happens as soon as Kuro appears, and he melts into a glass ball. Everyone is stunned by the strange occurrence, and Mahiru is awestruck that Kuro chickened out at the last minute. Higen approaches Mahiru to attack him, and Mahiru's mark also disappears. Licht steps in to protect him and creates a sphere of piano around Higen. Higen is impressed, and he summons flames. Mahiru is disappointed that he can only watch and do nothing to support Licht because he is a weak loser. While Mahiru wallows in self-pity, Licht tells him that he can become stronger if he wants to be. The fight eventually ends with Higen defeating Licht. Mahiru charges at Higen to stop him from leaving with Licht, but Higen simply paralyzes him and disappears before Mahiru recovers. The others arrive at the scene and find Mahiru. He explains what happened and weeps that he was completely useless when his friend needed him. Misono finds a mobile phone nearby and they deduce that it belongs to Higen. The phone rings almost immediately, and Misono answers the call. The voice on the other side is Tsubaki's, and he claims to be a relative of the owner. However, Misono asks them to return Lawless and Licht if they want to get the phone back. Tsubaki realizes that the Servamps and Eves have the phone, but he refuses Misono's ridiculous offer. Misono informs him that they have one of the subclasses hostages and are willing to exchange hostages. Misono states that he will call back when they are ready to set up a meeting for the exchange of hostages. Tsubaki informs the rest of the subclasses about what happened, and Shamrock insults Higen for losing the phone. Lawless awakes in a dark room. He realizes that he has been bound and wonders where he is. He also wonders if Licht is still alive, oblivious that Licht has also been captured and is imprisoned in the same building. Lawless thinks Licht is dead, and he further strengthens his belief that life doesn't matter and everyone is just ordinary. At the resort, the Eves discuss their next plan of action. Mahiru is worried that Licht could be in danger if he has been far away from Lawless for too long. However, Misono tells Mahiru that he isn't fit for battle and would have to stay back to free Kuro from the orb. When the others leave, Mahiru is heartbroken. All he wanted to do was save Licht, but he ended up causing complications instead. He is unhappy that he has always depended on Kuro to get anything done, and has a record of weakness and terrible decisions. He begins to weep when he thinks about how he can't help Kuro even when Kuro needs him the most. Suddenly, a voice comes from within the orb and teases Licht for weeping. He sees a miniature Kuro inside the ball, and he is delighted that Kuro is alive. Kuro has no explanation for what happened, but he is sure that there is no threat to his life. The lazy cat suggests that Mahiru leaves him inside the orb since he will never get to do anything. Mahiru promises to return Kuro to normal at all costs, so that they can train and become stronger together. If they'll be fighting against Tsubaki and his subclasses, then they need to be strong. Mahiru presents the ball to Misono and the others. Unfortunately, no one else can see miniature Kuro or hear him talk. Tetsu ignores their eccentric shenanigans and procures a weapon to break the ball open. He believes that Kuro will escape once the ball is open, and he is prepared to break the ball open. When he is about to strike the ball, Mahiru stops him and offers to do it instead. He thinks it will be effective since he is the Eve of Mahiru. A while has passed and the boys have tried every single weapon to try to break the ball open, but every single method fails. Krantz appears with a mascot and announces that Licht is missing. Mahiru quickly apologized and took the blame, insisting that Higen could only capture Licht because Licht was protecting him. This is true, but we don't judge orphans. Everyone gathers around the table to form another plan, and Misono informs them that rescuing the hostages is their top priority. While they discuss, they prepare plans and somebody suggests that they restrain and hide him from sight. Mahiru asks them to release Lila once they have no other use for him, but Misono disagrees. They argue for a while, but Mahiru insists, and Misono eventually agrees. Lila is shocked by the kind gesture, and Mahiru assures him that he prefers handling matters peacefully and without conflict. Krantz unveils a water gun and claims that it is effective against the vampires. The others wonder if he has lost his mind, but he demonstrates the water by placing a butt in Hugh's palm. The water kicks in, and Hugh is immediately knocked out. Krantz explains that the water is holy, and that many holy tools repel vampires. Mahiru learns that Krantz visits a peculiar antique dealer to purchase the items. Mahiru knows that the antique dealer should be the Eve of Envy. Misono protests against getting help from the antique because he isn't trustworthy, but Mahiru needs answers about reverting Kuro to his normal state. They decide to part ways, with Mahiru heading to find the antique dealer, while the others plot to break Licht and his Servamp out of Tsubaki's hideout. Mahiru apologizes to Krantz for not sticking around to help retrieve Licht. Krantz tells him a bit about Licht's last life. Licht had always wanted to be a great musician, and he trained hard until he was recognized as a prodigy even as a child. His parents decided to attend one of his shows, and Licht got so nervous that his hair turned white. Despite panicking, Licht had a performance so beautiful beautiful that the audience referred to him as an angel who descended from the heavens. Krantz advises Mahiru to not consider his low talents but to fix his sights on what he wants to become instead. Mahiru boards the bus to go to the antique shop. The entire bus becomes empty after several car packs, but Mahiru remains on the train. Suddenly, a black fox appears beside Mahiru. Mahiru is startled and then speaks with Tsubaki's voice. It complains that his subclass isn't with Mahiru, and he causes an energy explosion within the train. However, the entire encounter is just an illusion as Mahiru finds himself at the car park with the train intact. He runs off to urgently find the antique dealer, while Tsubaki and the others agree to ambush Misono instead. Mahiru arrives at the antique shop, and a stranger within the ship addresses Mahiru as Mikuni, thinking he is the actual antique dealer. The door opens and a crazy dude appears. He is dressed in what looks like a lab coat, and he laughs maniacally. He leads Mahiru into the shop, and Mahiru learns that Mikuni isn't currently in the shop. When Mahiru introduces himself as the Eve of a vampire, the eccentric figure enters into a frenzy. He expresses his desire to experiment on Mahiru and introduces himself as Johan. He writes Mahiru's name on Mahiru's head because he forgets people's names very easily. Mikuni arrives and attacks Johan for messing around in his shop during his absence. He reintroduces himself to Mahiru, and Mahiru discovers that Mikuni is Misono's elder brother. Johan interrupts and requests to see Kuro. Mahiru reveals the ball and explains that he needs help with reverting Kuro to normal. Johan admits that he has never seen such a thing with Servamps. He can't wait to begin experimenting with Mahiru, and he throws Mahiru into his secret lab through a revolving mirror door. Meanwhile, the others are forming a plan in the resort. They attempt to figure out Tsubaki's hideout from all the pictures on the phone. After a while of searching and surveillance, they find the right building, a massive building of about 45 floors. Hugh explains that the building is tall enough to keep Licht and Lawless apart while keeping them relatively weak. Misono hypothesizes that Tsubaki and Heigen would be protecting the hostages in their enclosures. Tetsu is tired and leaves to rest. When the others ask why he is leaving when crucial plans are being made, he assures them that he trusts their judgment and will do whatever they ask him to. Johan continues to run several tests on Mahiru and collect various data from him. Mahiru becomes tired of Johan's bickering and asks him to check on Kuro instead. Mikuni intercepts and asks Mahiru if he is ready to defeat Tsubaki once he releases Kuro. Mahiru is surprised because he thinks it is impossible to kill a vampire. Mikuni admits that vampires are immortal, but he teaches Mahiru that they can be killed. Subclasses can be killed when a Servamp sucks their blood. Servamps can also be killed if the gifts given to them by their Eves are destroyed in the right manner. Mahiru also recalls that he gave Kuro a bell when he picked him up. He becomes wary of losing the bell, but he is more concerned about saving Kuro. He turns to Johan, who tells him that there are no records of Kuro's current condition. Mahiru is certain Johan isn't a vampire and asks why he is obsessed with vampires. He learns that Johan is even more deranged than he thought. Johan has only been engrossed by the destructive nature of the vampires and the immense power of Kuro, who has never been defeated. While they talk, he gives Mahiru a cup of tea, which Mahiru drinks immediately. Mahiru collapses once he tastes the drink, and he struggles to move. Johan and Mikuni explain that the tea contains a potion that will send Mahiru into Kuro's mind. That way, they can come in contact and talk. Tsubaki is impatient since he can't find his subclass anywhere. Just then, the Eves call him, and they inform him to come for the exchange. Tsubaki prepared to leave by himself, but his subclasses wanted to go in his stead since it was a trap. He insists that he will be fine and departs by himself. The Eves are spying and they inform Hugh as soon as Tsubaki leaves. They sneak into the hotel with disguises and Krantz inquires about the rooms. Misono and Lily sneak into an elevator to access the top floors, but Sakuya steps into the elevator with them. He knows that Misono is with the rest of the Eves and smashes the emergency button. The entire hotel is plunged into a blackout once Sakuya smashes the button. The elevator begins to fall without the power to pull it up, and Misono prepares to fight Sakuya with Lily. He instructs the rest of the Eves with their servants to spring into action. Tsubaki arrives at the rendezvous for the exchange, and he is confronted by 5 different mascots. Tsubaki finds it super ridiculous that he is confronted by mascots and wonders just what they could be planning. He soon learns that the mascots are all subclasses of Lawless, and they demand that he release Licht and Lawless. Tsubaki shows the mascots that he left the hotel with the keys to where the hostages are locked up, and this is a direct point that they are trapped in the hotel until he returns. The mascots also inform Tsubaki that his subclass is inside one of the mascots, and Tsubaki becomes wary of his attacks so that he doesn't hurt his own subclass. The fight continues, and the mascots display overwhelming strength. Tsubaki eventually gets serious and announces that he wouldn't leave if he doesn't retrieve his subclass. The elevator lands at the bottom floor, and Misono understands that they have very limited time before Tsubaki returns. He recalls their plans to fight the battle-capable subclasses and how they would be distributed. Once the elevator opens, Misono is shocked to find the bottom floor empty. Sakuya reveals that it was all a lie from the beginning, and that Licht and Lawless are not hidden far apart from one another. They aren't in any form of danger at all. The plan was to lure the Eves and all the Servamps to the hotel so that they could be defeated by Tsubaki and his subclasses. When Tetsu and Hugh arrive at the top floor, they are surprised to see that the rest of the subclasses are awaiting them. Tetsu worries that they are outnumbered, but Hugh assures him that he will handle the subclasses. Misono and Lily are having trouble with Sakuya, who attacks with a chainsaw. Misono is worried about Hugh, who has worked into a trap and wants to escape to provide him with reinforcement, but Sakuya continues to restrain them with his chainsaw. Misono decides to resort to mental attacks, and he tries to get Sakuya all riled up. Sakuya explains that Tsubaki isn't just interested in the death of the Servamps. He is in search of a key, and he is certain that the war will lead him to the key. Licht wakes up bound in a strange room. He wonders where he is, and scolds Lawless for his current predicament. Lawless can hear Licht's voice, and he thinks it's because their minds are connected. Lawless yells about how life means nothing, and everyone will eventually die. He is certain that Licht will die soon, and that would be all. However, Licht retorts and insists that he will survive. They wonder why they can hear each other so clearly, and Lawless proposes that they might be in the room next to each other. They soon continue their argument about dreams and the meaning of life again. The argument continues to intensify, and the two begin to shout. Suddenly, Licht breaks down the wall and crosses into Lawless's cell. Lawless is awestruck, but Licht ignores his reaction and asks them to fight instead. Meanwhile, Mahiru appears in a strange world, and he finds himself in an expansive desert. He finds the creature within Kuro, responsible for power, and he asks where Kuro is. The creature tells him that Kuro doesn't want to see him, but Mahiru continues to search. He hears the sound of Kuro's bells and attempts to trace it. Mahiru walks all around the desert and finds nothing until he falls to the ground, and he realizes that the sound is coming from below the desert. Mahiru wonders about how he could get below the desert, and recalling his lessons from Licht about the power of imagination, Mahiru cuts out a piece of the ground with his palm. He finds water below the desert and he swims through until he arrives at a fleet of stairs. He descends the stairs and approaches a door, but he suddenly appears somewhere else. He finds himself at a table with the rest of the 7 Servamps. Hugh announces to the Servamps that they are gathering to discuss the request for C3 and whether they should kill the target or not. While they argue, Mahiru realizes that he is in Kuro's memories, and this was the story Lawless wanted to tell him. The Servamps refuse to succumb to one another, and Mahiru realizes that the target is the man who created all the Servamps. Some of them think he is too dangerous and shouldn't be left alive. The other thinks he has done nothing wrong and he should be left alone. Since they've arrived at a stalemate, Hugh asks Kuro to cast his vote and break the tie. Kuro doesn't hesitate, and he casts his vote to kill the man. He even volunteers to do it alone and get it over with. Lawless becomes furious and snaps at Kuro. He is in disbelief that Kuro will choose to murder their creator instead of saving him. However, Kuro has his mind made up because he thinks the creation of vampires isn't a good thing. The other Servamps restrain the furious Lawless, and Kuro leaves. Mahiru chases after him, and they appear in another of Kuro's memories. Kuro arrives at their creator's home and discovers that he is indeed alive. Kuro hesitates and questions his decision to kill him. Vines suddenly shoot out from under the ground to restrain Mahiru and stop him from observing the memory, but Mahiru persists. He realizes that Kuro is full of regret as he cuts down his master. Once Kuro is done, we see another memory of all the other Servamps telling Kuro that they forgive him. Lawless refuses to forgive him instead, and promises to keep his grudge with Kuro forever. Mahiru is still restrained by the vines, and he struggles to grab onto Kuro, who continues to walk away in regret. When darkness engulfs Mahiru, he appears somewhere else and finds the previous creature in his hands. He quickly lets go, and the creature congratulates him for coming that far. He informs Kuro that the current place they're in contains all of Kuro's secrets, and he offers Mahiru weapons to break into the secrets. Mahiru refuses the offer and approaches a massive wall separating him from Kuro to knock. He calls out to Kuro and introduces himself and Mahiru. A door appears, and Mahiru walks through the door until he finds Kuro. Kuro is in a perpetual state of regret and punishes himself for the actions he has taken, and apparently, he has been this way inside his mind for centuries. Luckily, our boy shows up with the power of words, and he easily clears out all of the doubts and pain with a few sentences, curing Kuro and retrieving him. We see Lawless's past as he talks to an actress who seems to be his Eve. He complains that the actress has begun to take her career less seriously and is having a nosedive, but she doesn't care. He attends Licht's concert and is captured by how talented the genius boy is. Lawless decides to kill the actress who was also his Eve. In the present, they're all in the hotel, and Licht just broke down the wall to cross into Lawless's room. He informs Lawless that he intends to kill him right there, and this amuses the Servamp. He reveals that he thinks Licht is also ordinary, and he expresses his desire to kill Licht right there. The two begin to fight, and the hotel trembles. Lawless realizes that it is difficult for him to move, and his wounds are barely even healing. Although he is sure that Licht is also in a terrible state, the two continue to charge at one another. With each exchange, Licht has the upper hand, constantly stomping on Lawless's head. However, Lawless continues to fight back. When he realizes that Licht isn't backing down, Lawless stops fighting and puts his weapon away. He admits that Licht is amazing and suggests that they stop the fight. Unfortunately, Licht refuses and challenges Lawless again. He insults Lawless and calls out his way of life and nihilistic philosophy, how Lawless cares for nothing and has zero ambitions. Lawless becomes enraged and darkness engulfs Licht. We appear inside Lawless's past where he chases after his Eve, a carefree princess called Ophelia. Ophelia jumps off a tree to catch a fruit, but Lawless saves her. Lawless has always been around since Ophelia was a little girl, and he watched as Ophelia grew into a beautiful princess. After a while, Ophelia announces to Lawless that she will be getting married. Her father has betrothed her to the prince of the neighboring kingdom to prevent the possibility of a war. Lawless pleads with Ophelia to run away with him. He promises her freedom and even eternal life if she decides to stay with him. Ophelia responds that she doesn't want freedom or power, but she wants to be a symbol of peace for the countries, and she agrees to the wedding. Bro is a simp and sits by to watch his love interest get married to someone else. They attempt to hide Lawless's identity, but he is discovered and captured. Ophelia helps him to escape, and Lawless has to hide and watch her live from the side. Sadly, the peace doesn't last, and another war breaks out. Lawless overhears some of the nobles planning to kill Ophelia, as it is the only thing that guarantees peace. He sneaks into the palace and tells Ophelia her fate, asking her to escape with him again. Ophelia refuses to leave and tells Lawless that she is ready to die. She turns down Lawless despite the assurance of safety that he provides because she doesn't want safety or freedom. She only wants everlasting peace for the countries even if it costs her life. Talk about delusional. Lawless weeps and vows to kill everyone who attempts to hurt her, but Ophelia forbids him from doing such. When it is time for the execution, Ophelia gives an electrifying speech to the citizens of both countries. Her words are piercing and convincing, and she urges them to dissolve their walls and continue to live in peace. Her execution speech is said to be the greatest in history, inspiring more people than Gol D. Roger. She is executed eventually, and the two nations become merged. A statue of her is erected as a monument of peace. The little kids speak of a hedgehog that is rumored to have been guarding the statue for centuries. They had no idea that it was Lawless who refused to leave the statue of some girl who turned her down and continued to cry like a worthless simp. Hugh appears and warns him that Servamps aren't supposed to fall in love with their Eves. He presents Licht with a letter from Kuro, summoning all the Servamps to a meeting to discuss an urgent matter. Turns out the meeting is their discussion on whether they should kill their creator, and this is why Licht is so furious. He believed that their creator was the closest thing they had to a family, and he should be spared. He also wanted to further Ophelia's philosophy of peace as much as he could, but Kuro insisted on killing their creator. Lawless is heartbroken and returns to the nation, but he is devastated by the sight. A stronger nation attacked the kingdom that Ophelia died to establish, and they reduced the entire thing to rubble. He watches as the last monument in the kingdom, Ophelia's statue, crumbles to the ground. The pain and sorrow drive Lawless mad, and he becomes the nihilistic self that Licht is familiar with. He now believes that nothing matters and that no life is special. Everyone dies. The memory ends, and we see Licht sitting and watching as the curtains close. A creature is beside him, and Licht recognizes it as Lawless's manifestation. Licht rises to his feet and goes up the stage, revealing a piano. Licht begins to play, and all of Lawless's memories begin to flow back to him, but this time he has the overwhelming power of Licht's uplifting words to guide him through. Such a lifesaver. Lawless realizes that he could have done whatever he wanted since he was supposed to be Lawless. He could have saved Ophelia and made a better life with her. However, he has something different he wants to protect now. He wants to protect Licht at all costs and preserve him for as long as he can. He unveils the dog tag that Licht gave to him as a gift, a tag bearing his name. He would no longer be Lawless of greed. He is now Hyde. The name Licht originally gave him, though. We'll stick to Lawless, though, cause it's just badass. The two break the wall of their prison together, but they are confronted by Huygen, who is hell-bent on preventing their escape. Lawless is excited to fight a powerful enemy, and Huygen introduces himself to the two. Licht steals the show and asks Lawless to stay back while he fights Huygen alone. Lawless refuses, and the two begin a pathetic argument on who to face Huygen. Huygen is excited and his blood begins to boil. He summons flames and asks the two to just charge at him together. The fight begins right away, and they charge at Huygen, who is enclosed in flames. Lawless strikes Huygen, but he evades and counterattacks. He causes a small cut in Lawless's face that quickly becomes ignited with flames. Licht reminds Lawless that Huygen has the ability to cause flames if he scratches or injures them. Licht reminds Lawless that they can't drag the fight for too long, and the two perform a pincer attack on Huygen. Licht successfully lands a strong punch on Huygen, and they slam him into the wall. However, Huygen is still on his feet. They continue to attack him with coordinated attacks, swapping positions like Itadori and Todoi. Huygen becomes serious and removes his gloves. He touches Licht, but he doesn't cause an ignition. Instead, he tastes part of his blood and summons very powerful flames. The flames form a tornado that breaks through the ceiling of the skyscraper. Huygen has turned eccentric, and he is in the center of an inferno that Licht and Lawless can't approach. Meanwhile, Sakuya tells Misono and Lily about Tsubaki. Misono wonders why he would tell them Tsubaki's plans, but Sakuya thinks it doesn't matter since he won't let them leave the basement. He attacks Misono with a chainsaw, and it barely misses Misono's face. Sakuya reveals that he knows how to stop a Servamp. This is done by destroying the gifts their Eves gave to them, and a small watch around Lily's neck is Misono's gift. He summons one of Tsubaki's swords and begins to slash at Lily, who defends with his scythe. Luckily, Mikuni appears with his Servamp, and they corner Sakuya. Misono is furious that Mikuni is helping him, and he insults Mikuni. Mikuni ignores Misono's childish insults and asks him to rescue his friends instead. Misono leaves with Lily, while Mikuni stays back with his Servamp to restrain Sakuya. Tetsu is also fighting against the rest of the subclasses with Hugh. He summons bats from within the coffin, and Hugh controls the bats to attack the subclasses. The subclasses easily defend against the bats and execute their counterattack. The jester vampire, Barukia, successfully traps Hugh inside a box, and after the count of 3, Hugh disappears from the box. Misono and Lily appear afterward, and Barukia informs them that Hugh is already gone. Misono is furious that they underestimated the subclasses. Although Hugh is very much stronger than they are, the subclasses already have an elaborate plan on how to capture Hugh. Misono realizes that they are outnumbered. Huygen is restraining the greedy pair at the top floor, and Hugh is currently missing. Tetsu attempts to fight the subclasses himself, but Otogiri captures him with her strings. Suddenly, before Misono can give the order for everyone to retreat, the entire hotel begins to tremble as something climbs up its walls. Everyone is frozen in place as they see Mahiru riding a massive beast. Kuro doesn't appear as a cat. Instead, he appears as a giant lion. He roars and it resounds across the entire city. He is so massive that Tsubaki can easily spot him atop the hotel from far away, and Tsubaki becomes excited. Kuro reverts to his human form, and Mahiru summons his broom, preparing to provide reinforcement for the rest of the Servamps and their Eves. Mikuni calls his Servamp JJ, and they head up the stairs to see Kuro and Mahiru. Mahiru learns that Hugh has been teleported to an unknown location and that the others are still fighting within the hotel. He assures the others that they will rescue Licht and Lawless, and then they will rescue Hugh. He changes his broom into a staff and faces off against the subclasses with the others. Otogiri attacks first with her puppets, but Mahiru and Kuro defeat her in a single move, knocking her out in the process. Barukia is shocked, and he charges at Mahiru along with Shamrock. Kuro responds by creating massive wings behind his back and shooting out spikes from the wings. Mahiru reinforces the spikes with his staff, and they defeat Barukia with Shamrock in a single attack. Egan has defeated Lawless and Licht, and he prepares to leave to rescue the other subclasses from the revamped Kuro. Lawless recognizes the massive lion as Kuro. It's Kuro's original form that no one has seen for centuries, and he wonders just how Mahiru was able to change Kuro and bring back Kuro's true strength. He struggles to rise to his feet and attacks Huygen again, but he is too weak, and Huygen knocks him back. He asks Lawless to surrender, or he will kill Licht. The sadistic Licht responds before Lawless can, and he tells Huygen that he will never surrender until Huygen is under his feet. Huygen explains that he only wants to make Tsubaki happy, and he will continue to kill until this is the case. While he holds Licht in his hands, Licht draws a piano on his body. The unsuspecting Huygen watches with amusement until Licht activates the piano and sends a powerful wave through Huygen's body. Lawless is impressed by Licht's intelligence, but this only infuriates Huygen further. Licht summons his piano, and once he begins to play, Lawless's attire changes and he turns into some weird hero. He suddenly becomes overwhelmingly powerful, and he encloses all of Huygen's flames, snuffing it out. He begins to toy around with Huygen and strikes Hogan with his finishing move. With Huygen defeated, Licht prepares to join the others, but he collapses under exhaustion, and Lawless lies with him. The two talk, and Licht reminds him to let go of the past and focus on the present. Mahiru and Kuro arrive in the room, and they help the exhausted Licht. The rest of the Eves and Servamps gather after defeating all the subclasses. The mission to rescue the greed pair is a success, but they have lost Hugh in the process. Mahiru asks after Leela, and he learns that he is inside Hugh's coffin. This means that the mascots have a fake hostage with them. Mahiru asks Kuro to speak to Lawless, and Kuro does so with hesitation. He approaches Lawless and apologizes for the past. The brothers forgive one another, and Lawless appreciates Mahiru for helping them solve their long-lasting feud. He reveals that his name is Hyde and even shows his tag to the others. However, Lila is livid and consumed with fury. He refuses to let the Servamp who massacred all of his friends live freely and laugh. He doesn't want Lawless to have a happy ending, so he snatches Lawless's tag before anyone can react. He declares that he will avenge all of his friends by destroying Lawless forever. Mahiru pleads with him not to do it and asks Lila to return the tag. However, Lila hesitates. He asks Mahiru to forgive him because he believes he has to avenge his friends. Tsubaki appears suddenly beside Lila, and he is glad to finally find his missing subclass. He apologizes to Lila and receives the tag, preparing to fight off the entire squad by himself. Misono is shocked that Tsubaki returned so quickly and remains paralyzed in fear. Tsubaki is impressed that they defeated Hogan and marvels at the level of damage they caused to the building. Tsubaki continues to toss the tag in his hands while approaching Kuro. Licht prepares to charge, but Lawless stops him. He knows that Licht is too exhausted to last against Tsubaki, and he is also weak. He turns to Kuro, who is the only Servamp present that can match Tsubaki in strength. Tetsu is impatient and asks if he knows what happened to Hugh. Tsubaki explains that Barukia's special box teleported Hugh to a smaller box in his possession. It is a technique for transporting, and he has Hugh within his grasp. Mahiru asks Tsubaki for his purposes, and Tsubaki explains that his only purpose is to clean up his master's mess. He was created as a weapon to kill the rest of the Servamps. He reveals his right hand, which is completely black, and summons a sword. He strikes the tag with that sword, and Lawless screams. A thick fog begins to spill from Lawless, and it quickly engulfs the entire room. Tsubaki prepared to finish him off, but Kuro stopped him. Kuro admits that Tsubaki is their sibling because only their creator is capable of creating a monster as powerful as Tsubaki. Tsubaki reveals that he has been searching for the Black Lion who killed his master, and he asks for his master's final words. Tsubaki is furious that he didn't get to witness the last moment of his master and blames Kuro for killing him. The fog continues to get turbulent, and the others find it hard to remain standing. Licht finds Lawless as a porcupine and suggests that they all escape to lower floors. However, Mahiru refuses to live and only proceeds to help Kuro. Kuro stops Tsubaki's sword and tells him that he is willing to talk things through. He wants to discuss his mistakes and make peace with Tsubaki. The eccentric Tsubaki is blinded by rage and the thirst for revenge, and so he refuses. He gets all philosophical and gives various reasons why he must avenge his master and kill all the Servamps. Tsubaki suddenly begins to pull all the fog into himself until there is no fog in sight. The tension rises until a ride light exudes from his body and spreads across the sky in an instant. Immediately, swords begin to rain over civilians all over the city. Everyone finds shelter as buildings begin to tremble from the endless barrage of swords raining. Kuro becomes furious that Tsubaki will endanger the lives of innocent civilians, just to prove a point. He approaches Tsubaki, and Tsubaki shoots swords at him, but Kuro deflects the swords. He grabs Tsubaki and gives him another chance to stop and resolve everything with a quality conversation like real couples do. Unfortunately, Tsubaki summons swords that stab him from all directions instead. Kuro doesn't retaliate. Instead, he suggests that they express their pain in a conversation. Our boy got stronger but is now a therapist. Talk about a downgrade. Meanwhile, Mahiru is still searching for the two Servamps, and he meets Mikuni, who asks him to escape while he can. They blockhead. Mahiru refuses and insists that he has to help Kuro. Mikuni tells him that dealing with Tsubaki is Kuro's problem, and Mahiru has his goat moment. He stares at Mikuni and informs him that he is Kuro's Eve. This means that they can confront everything together. The him aura is so massive that Mikuni lets Mahiru leave. Meanwhile, Tsubaki has injured Kuro terribly, and he prepares to land another attack, but Mahiru stops him. Tsubaki shoots one of his swords that cut Mahiru's face, and Kuro becomes furious, transforming into his massive lion form. The building begins to tremble and certain floors collapse. Rubble was falling towards Licht and Lawless, but Rods appeared out of nowhere and saved them, turns around to fund the members of C3. They had evacuated all the civilians to safety and surrounded the hotel with the Mad Dogs to ensure Tsubaki's defeat. They have also helped the rest of the Servamps to safety, and Tetsu finds Hugh in an ambulance. Sakuya is also heading towards the ceiling to help Mahiru. Kuro easily restrains Tsubaki with his paws, but Tsubaki continues to provoke him. Mahiru calls Kuro and asks him to let Tsubaki go, but Tsubaki responds to the kind gesture by sending a sword flying towards Mahiru. Sakuya appears and steps in the path of the attack, taking the damage in place of Mahiru. Kuro can no longer tolerate Tsubaki, and he prepares to rip his head off, but Mahiru steps in between the two. Suddenly, Tsubaki's chest opens up like a keyhole, and the staff with Mahiru morphs into a key. He quickly inserts the key into Tsubaki's chest without hesitation, and he is immediately drawn into Tsubaki's memories. After he was created, his teacher gave him the mandate of watching over his older siblings, while informing him that he had the power to destroy them. However, after Kuro's attack, Tsubaki becomes hostile and vows to use his powers to destroy his siblings instead. Tsubaki turns towards Mahiru in his memories and attacks him, and this attack transcends into reality, but Kuro steps in and stops the attack. Tsubaki summons a sea of swords and begins to shoot it towards the duo. Kuro struggles to block them, and he asks Mahiru to escape, but Mahiru stands by his side and they fight their way through the barrage of swords together until Mahiru draws close enough to Tsubaki and embraces him. Tsubaki freezes and all his swords disappear. Later, Mahiru arrives at the shelter with Kuro and meets with the others. Tsubaki can be seen healing Sakuya. He tells Sakuya that he is free and asks him to live his life. Tsubaki no longer holds a grudge against his siblings, and the hatred has disappeared. Life continues as usual for the rest of the Servamps, and the subclasses are thrown into prison. Mahiru and Kuro continue to live together, avoiding troublesome things and living simply.